I constantly keep getting asked the question, and people sometimes they seem a little angry. Suge robbed Tupac, and didn't he? You know what I mean? He took and I'm like, well, no, he didn't. He couldn't have. It was mathematically impossible. It was contractually impossible. And when you look at really what was going on, Tupac had his destiny in his hands to a certain degree, other than the situation that he signed with David Kenner prior to getting out of prison. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into some of the straight game.
Life is like cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy DELRAY, Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. I thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the channel. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of the straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. I'm going to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I constantly get asked the question of whether, you know, Suge Knight took advantage of Tupac and all of those things. And like I said, I'm gonna delve into a little bit of why people say that. And like I said, it was a lawsuit that Afeni filed against Death Row and David Kenner when Tupac died, right? And so for everything that Afeni Shakur understood at that time, she thought that that was the route that she was supposed to go, and so she followed that route. You know what I mean, with her attorney, Mr. Fishbein. And so when they looked and took a deep dive into what was really going on with Tupac's business and the finances, if you will, right? When they took a real deep dive, what they came to find out was Tupac and what Yasmin had talked about did want an accounting. They wanted an accounting of his, you know, where money was being spent, you know, where was it going, what was he paying for, and so on and so forth, right? And so legally and contractually, Suge Knight, you know, as we know it and understand it for most people who didn't before, Suge Knight couldn't rob Tupac of his royalties or of his music. Number one, factually, contractually, legally, Tupac wasn't signed to Death Row. He was still signed to Interscope Records. So therefore, Suge Knight couldn't take any of Tupac's royalties, any of his music, or anything of that nature, if you will, right? Suge Knight benefited handsomely from the publishing aspect of all of his artists, you know, who were signing deals at that particular time. They didn't have 360 deals, but a lot of artists were giving up their publishing for checks or for what other reasons, right? But where the situation comes in that was real murky, and like I said, you can put it in different aspects. When Afeni Shakur filed the lawsuit against Death Row, right? On September 3rd, 1996, Tupac was charged with expenses associated with Michelle A. at that particular time, which was Suge Knight's girlfriend. Right? She was favored by Suge Knight. A Range Rover, right? And I'm just going to run it down to you. A Range Rover, Tupac was charged with this. This was in the accounting that they submitted to Afeni and her side, basically, of what Tupac had owed. So basically, Tupac was charged for Michelle A's Range Rover, right? And it was a check number of what was it? Number 1094 GJ reference number 96P in an amount of $1,453.51. That wasn't the price of the Range Rover. That was just another check that was being charged by Tupac, right? On what was it? October 1995, Tupac was charged. Listen, October 1995. Now, Tupac got out of jail on the 12th of October, 1995. Tupac was charged $23,857 for repairs to a Porsche automobile, although the accountant at that time, a guy with the last name by the name of Cantrop, and Suge Knight owned Porsches. Tupac did not. So Tupac was charged $23,857 for the repairs to a Porsche automobile, although the accountant and Suge Knight owned the Porsches and Tupac didn't. That's where people came into the understanding once they read this lawsuit, that the accounting, and like I said, whether you want to blame Suge for it or the accountant, like I said, I would blame the accountant more than I would blame Suge, because the accountant has to put his name on the accounted for statement, if you will, right? And so by that being what that is, these are just some of the things that came up in regards to that, right? Like I said, in 1996, Tupac was charged over $28,000 for the purchase of a Chevy Suburban. Title to the vehicle was taken in Tupac's name initially. So the title to the vehicle was taken out in Tupac's name initially, but was then transferred by Suge Knight to his brother-in-law, Norris Anderson's name, without any compensation to Tupac, right? So now, that right there, this is all legal documentation that I'm giving you right here. Nothing that I'm telling you from my own, what I want to tell you because I want somebody to feel a certain kind of way. You know what I mean? On July 31st, 1996, Tupac was charged $51,425, a check number 16508, GJ reference number 17342P, in connection with the cost of transferring the car to Mr. Anderson, that Suburban, right? $51,000, ladies and gentlemen, right? On June 13th, 1996, Tupac was charged $2,700 for the child support paid on behalf of Nate Dogg. May he rest in peace, brother Nate Dogg. According to Death Row performer, another Death Row performer, check number 15404, GJ reference number 16184P, right? This is all of the accounting that was given to Afeni Shakur and her attorneys in that case involving when Afeni Shakur sued Death Row and David Kenner. In February of 1996, Tupac was charged $115,507, comprised of 3 separate payments for jewelry purchased, right, from B&L Diamonds in downtown LA. And like I said, one check was for $67,000, the other one was for $15,000, and another one for $32,000. But like I said, they said that Suge Knight, at the time that Tupac received the jewelry, represented the jewelry in question, was that they basically said that it was a gift to Tupac from Suge Knight, but the bills were not even paid, and the estate was being, at that particular time, during the filing of this, and they received this information, Tupac's estate was being charged and being sued on those bills by B&L Diamonds, right? So like I said, once again, this boils down to accounting. Now, I don't know how that the accounting situation panned out to be what it was, but that's simply what it was. One has to remember on August 27, 1996, David Kenner was fired, right? And so at that particular time, he could no longer represent Tupac's interests involving anything involving the music industry, if you will, and was then forced to basically resign, if you will. So, like I said, for people who don't really understand, he was done. You know what I mean? And so when people ask me, did Suge Knight rob Tupac of his royalties of his music, the answer is no. But there was some kind of financial foolery involving the accountant and involving Tupac being charged for stuff that wasn't his, had nothing to do with him. from that perspective. Like I said, that Tupac's estate then was being sued for, like the jewelry and this truck and Nate Dogg's child support. All of these checks and things like that were being attributed to Tupac at that particular time, which I thought was, I mean, like I said, in looking over the accounting, I mean, one was supposed to do that, but I would think that that was a bad move, if you will, right? Additionally, in October 1996, Steve Cantrock, that was the guy who was the actual accountant at the time, right? Cantrock, a Los Angeles accountant for Death Row, alleged that he alleged that Suge Knight physically threatened him into signing a confession that he had stolen $4.5 million from Death Row, right? So Steve Cantrock said that Suge Knight threatened him to sign some kind of confession that he had stolen $4.5 million from Death Row. Cantrock alleged that by a threat of force and physical intimidation, Knight forced him to sign an IOU for the repayment of that sum. Since signing that confession, which Cantrock maintains is totally false, at that particular time, Steve Cantrock was in hiding. This was back then, ladies and gentlemen, not now, so that people don't get it twisted. So yeah, that was part of what that was. So when people ask me that, like I said, I try to refer them to videos on my YouTube channel. But like I said, so I just wanted to, when I was asked that question, I wanted to rehash it. So that was the situation involving what that was and what that was about, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, when you understand the bigger picture of what it was, Tupac was a principal of Gutter Entertainment, right? As well as being the sole performer whose services were offered by Gutter in a situation that he was involved in with TNT Interscope, a Tupac and Gutter agreement, right? Tupac guaranteed that Gutter would fulfill all of the obligations which was obligated to fulfill under that agreement. That's why I tell people, like, it was impossible for Suge Knight to rob Tupac of his royalties. He didn't do that. But the accounting situation, which in a lot of companies, you know, there's always something crazy going on. You want to, you know, like I said, you know, especially when you have, like, you know, these big accounting firms, like, and things like that. So like I said, I think it was like, you know, when you deal with the big picture, it was just, you know, that part of it was kind of crazy. And things got revealed when Afeni filed the lawsuit. So a lot of, you know, things that normally wouldn't have played out or, you know, be focused on at that particular time were focused on, right? You know, and like I said, that was the lawsuit. Afeni Shakur, basically, and then and the funny part about it was, I wouldn't say the funny part, but you know, it was United States District Court, Central District of California, Afeni Shakur and Richard S. Fishbein as joint administrators of the estate of Tupac Shakur as plaintiffs versus Death Row Records, Marion Suge Knight and David Kenner defendants, complaint for damages accounting and injunctive relief, and the demand for jury trial, right? So yeah, that was what that was. It wasn't about anybody or anything Suge Knight trying to rob him, but there were a lot of accounting irregularities involved with that situation, as well as the accountant himself saying that he was being threatened by Suge Knight at that particular time. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what the accountant had said at that particular time, that Suge Knight threatened him, got him to sign an IOU saying that he owed a certain amount of money, approximately $4.5 million, and that you know, the accountant said that he had went into hiding after that. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, that's the bigger side of what this is. And you know, like I said, let's be clear. Tupac was not technically robbed of his royalties in the traditional sense of someone stole his catalog. That didn't happen. The estate owns and controls his music at this particular time, you know what I mean? And yeah, you know, Tupac's estate, you know, after taking care of all of the legal fees, you know, and things like that, and settling everything up, you know, his estate does pretty well, you know, with the music and the royalties that he does generate from his catalog, as well as other things that they probably license his likenessness, and other things that they might license. So like I said, yeah, that was basically what it was. So no, he wasn't robbed. Technically, like I said, there were a lot of accounting irregularities, but that got handled also. And like I said, once again, yeah, your boy DELRAY, ladies and gentlemen, straight gang.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.